breakdown of a deck that I've been building. It's a black and white deck. The main focus of the deck is life gain, and by gaining life, buffing 2 key cards that the entire rest of the deck is basically built around. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the 2 main cards in the deck that the rest of the deck is kind of shaped around are the Bloodthirsty Aerialist and the Twin Blade Paladin. The Bloodthirsty Aerialist is a flying card. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Bloodthirsty Aerialist. And then Twin Blade Paladin, in a similar vein, whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Twin Blade Paladin. As long as you have 25 or more life, Twin Blade Paladin has double strike. So, the rest of the deck is kind of focused on gaining life, so, you want to get these cards out as quickly as possible and start buffing them, as much as possible. So, the rest of the deck is kind of focused on gaining life quickly to buff these cards. Hopefully you have them in the battlefield so that you can, get these guys up to, get these creatures up to 5/5 or higher, so you can really start getting damage done to your opponent. The other cards in the deck, just get started with the 1-drops. We have a Healer's Hawk. It's a 1/1 flying lifelink creature card. I included this in the deck because, well, one, it's a 1-drop flying with lifelink. I mean, that just kind of all speaks for itself, kind of the utility of the card. But if you're coming up against a blue flying deck that has, that's playing pretty wide, that has a lot of creatures, just having this card in there so you have the ability to block other flyers, and then just having lifelink in general in this deck, I find is really, has a lot of utility. Anytime you use these cards, if you want to sacrifice them to block, or, if you just want to let them be part of a wide attack, no matter what, you're going to be gaining some life and buffing if buffing a card if you have the Bloodthirsty Aerialist or Twin Blade Paladin out there. Next we have Soul Mender. It's a 1/1, 1-drop, and he only has, really the main reason that I have included him in this deck is he has that ability where you can tap him and gain 1 life. So, if you have 1 or 2 of these out in the battlefield, along with the Bloodthirsty Aerialist and Twin Blade Paladin, all you need to do is tap them either at the beginning or end of your turn, and that's an instant buff. And if the more you have on the field, the more you can buff every turn. Next is Vampire of the Dire Moon. It's a 1/1, 1-drop with Death Touch and lifelink. Very similar to why I have the Healer's Hawk included in this deck, but it's a card that if you have any problem cards, or if your opponent has any problem cards for you, you can just choose to attack with these cards and sacrifice them and just get rid of things if they choose to block, or if they're choosing to attack and you have these untapped, it's just a way to get rid of any problem cards. And in this deck, I'm more than happy to let my 1-drops or use them to kind of sacrifice, because I do have the Gruesome Menagerie down here to bring back 1 or 2 cards, or 3, I suppose. Next I have Dawn of Hope. This is an enchantment. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 2 mana if you do draw a card, and then for 4 mana, 1 being white mana, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. I only had 1 of these included before, but I found it so useful that I included another. This is just a way to speed the deck up, give you a little bit more draw power, and then if your opponent is playing really wide, or if you just need the extra 1/1 with lifelink, you have the ability to do so. Next is Eternal Isolation. It's a 2-drop sorcery. Put target creature with power 4 or greater in the bottom of its owner's library. Again, if you have a problem card, or if you have something that you see your opponent is trying to build, it's just a way to, take a powerful creature off the field and, make it not your problem anymore. Next is Savannah Sage. It's a 2/2 creature card, 2-drop. Once Savannah Sage enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. Pretty self-explanatory. Why I included it here. It's just a creature card that as soon as you put it on the field, it will buff the Bloodthirsty Aerialist or Twin Blade Paladin, and it's a fairly cheap, only 2 mana cost. So, of all the cards in the deck, this is probably, one of the cards I would be fine with removing to add something else later. The next card is Sorin's Thirst. It's a 2-drop instant. And it deals 2 damage to a target creature, and you gain 2 life. It's, again, if you're fading, or if you're up against an opponent that's playing a very fast aggro deck with maybe like some weaker creatures, something with 2 toughness or less, it's just a quick way to get rid of those creatures, and then also gain life, so you're not buffing the creatures that you have on the field. Or I should say the Bloodthirsty Aerialist or Twin Blade Paladin. Next is the Elder Spell, 2-drop sorcery. Destroy any number of target planeswalkers. Choose a planeswalker you control. Put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker you destroyed this way. I really only included this in anticipation of facing a lot of decks that might have had planeswalkers. And so far I've really only played, I haven't played too much online, so I haven't faced a lot of decks where planeswalkers are an issue for me. But in the odd chance that I do come up against a deck that does have, a planeswalker or 2 that are really a problem for me, this is just a quick way to get rid of them and then buff the planeswalkers that I do have included in this deck. Next is Angel of Vitality. It's a flying creature, 2/2, 3-drop. If you would gain life, you gain that much life +1 instead. So, this is just kind of a way to compound the life gain to buff the Bloodthirsty Aerialist and the Twin Blade Paladin. So, it's just kind of a double buff for them, and then as long as you have 25 or more health, Angel of Vitality gets +2/+2. So, you can buff this card up to a 4/4, and then you're also double buffing, your heavy hitters, your Bloodthirsty Aerialist, and your Twin Blade Paladin. Next is obviously the Bloodthirsty Aerialist. We already went over that. After that, we have Mortify, which is an instant destroy target creature or enchantment. I might add more of these later, as I make changes to this deck. It's a 3-drop, but the main reason I included this as opposed to Murder or another card is it gives you the possibility of removing an enchantment. So if somebody throws a Pacifism or something out there that takes out a Bloodthirsty Aerialist or a Twin Blade Paladin, or if you have if you have a problem creature, it's just a card that you can throw out there to remove any issues or anything that might be slowing you down. After Twin Blade Paladin, we have 2 Vindictive Vampires. It's a 4-drop, 2/3 card. Whenever another creature you control dies, Vindictive Vampire deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. The reason I included this card is, in anticipation of having Soul Menders and Healer's Hawks and Vampire of the Dark Moon, I figure you're probably going to be sacrificing a lot of these cards or letting them die or, maybe letting them take the hit for you. In the case that you are losing those cards and you also have this one out on the battlefield as well, it's another way for you to gain 1 life, buffing a Bloodthirsty Aerialist or Twin Blade Paladin, and then also do some damage to your opponent. Also, this card does provide you with a little bit of block with that 3 toughness, but really ideally you would be using, if you have a Twin Blade Paladin or Bloodthirsty Aerialist out there, if you have 2, you can save 1 for block and the other for attack. But next is a 4-drop Basilica Bellhaunt. When Basilica Bellhaunt enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card and you gain 3 life. So, it just kind of disrupts your opponent if they have to discard a card. And then gaining 3 life obviously has utility in that it will buff a Twin Blade Paladin or Bloodthirsty Aerialist if you have one out there. Next is Bond of Discipline. Tap all creatures your opponent controls. Creatures you control gain lifelink until the end of the turn. I only had one of these before, but I had a lot of instances where I had this card in my hand and played it, and it was a game ender, very demoralizing play for your opponent. Forced a lot of scoops, and in a lot of cases won me a game early, so I included a second copy, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It just gives you a little bit of control in that you force your opponent to tap, and then by giving all of your creatures lifelink, you attack with all creatures, or you attack with as many creatures as you want. They'll all have lifelink. That will give you some life. By gaining life, you buff a Bloodthirsty Aerialist or a Twin Blade Paladin. Next, Gruesome Menagerie. I figured with this deck, in the case that you do sacrifice a lot of the 1-drops with lifelink or the Soul Menders, this would just be a way to bring them out into the battlefield. If they've made your if they've made your battlefield a little bit shallow, it's just a way to widen it back up, create more ways for you to block and things like that. Next is a Johnny Inspiring Leader. It's a really good planeswalker to have in the deck, in that it's immediately a +2, gains 2 life, and it gives you a +1/+1 counter on any target creature. So if you're playing with the Bloodthirsty Aerialist and a Twin Blade Paladin, you have the option to put a +1/+1 on another creature you might have out there. So the wider you make your battlefield, the better, because you have the ability to buff those other cards that maybe aren't getting buffed and maybe aren't getting attention, or maybe really aren't doing much for you. So you can power those up and actually make them players in the game as well. Its -3 is exile target creature. Its controller gains 2 life. If you have problem cards out there, giving 2 life to your opponent isn't a big deal. And then lastly, -10 creatures you control gain flying and double strike until the end of the turn. Not something I use too often, but definitely something good to have. It's situational for sure, but And then next I have Sorin, Vampire Lord. Up to 1 target creature gets +2/+0 until the end of a turn. Not the most amazing and doesn't have a lot of synergy with the deck, but something good to have, absolutely. It's -2. Sorin, Vampire Lord deals 4 damage to any target. You gain 4 life. So obviously that has a lot of synergy with the deck. Can help you get rid of any problem creatures, or just remove some health from your opponent, and then giving you life obviously buffs your Twin Blade Paladin or your Bloodthirsty Aerialist. And then Sorin's -8 until the end of the turn. Each vampire you control gains tap that creature to gain control of target creature. Another ability I probably won't be using too much. Doesn't have a lot of synergy with the deck, but it is something that you could use if you'd like to. Next is the basically just the basic lands, the mana pool that I have for this deck, and really I just have 8 plains, 8 swamps, 4 Godless Shrines, which I think Godless Shrines is a really useful mana card to have. Paying 2 life in a deck where life gain is kind of one of the points of the deck. 2 life is not that much to pay, and if you are in dire need of mana, you can bring it in untapped. And then lastly, Scoured Barrens enters the battlefield tapped, and you gain 1 life. So, it's something nice to start, a game with. Just gain that 1 life right away, and you have some mana out there. And then alternatively, you could hold on to these until later in the game as a quick buff for a Bloodthirsty Aerialist or a Twin Blade Paladin. So yeah, that's the deck I'm working with right now. I know it could use a lot of work, potentially, definitely, but this is what I'm working with right now, and probably in the next couple videos I'll play a couple games with this deck to show you what it's capable of, and maybe what its weaknesses are. And if you have any feedback for me about the deck, please feel free to share it. But